Library Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Chapter 44 The Killing of Kaṁsa After Kaṁsa's wrestlers express their determination, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the killer of Madhu, confronted Kṛṣṇa, and Lord Balarama, the son of Rohini, confronted Mustaka. Krishna and Kṛṣṇa and then Balarama and Mustaka locked themselves hand to hand, leg to leg, and each began to press against the other with a view to coming out victorious. They joined palm to palm, calf to calf, head to head, chest to chest and began to strike each other. The fighting increased as they pushed each other from one place to another. One captured the other and threw him down on the ground, and another rushed from the back to the front of another and tried to overcome him with a hold. The fighting increased step by step. There was picking up, dragging and pushing, and then the legs and hands were locked together. All the arts of wrestling were perfectly exhibited by the parties as each tried its best to defeat his opponent. But the audience in the wrestling arena was not very much satisfied because the combatants did not appear to be equally matched. They considered Krishna and Balarama to be mere boys before Kṛṣṇa and Mustaka, who were the strongest wrestlers, as solid as stone. Being compassionate and favoring Krishna and Balarama, the many ladies in the audience began to talk as follows: "Dear friends, there is injustice here," another said. "Even in front of the king this wrestling is going on between incompatible sides." The ladies had lost their sense of enjoyment. They could not encourage the fighting between the strong and the weak. Mustaka and Kṛṣṇa are just like thunderbolts, as strong as great mountains, and Krishna and Balarama are two delicate boys of very tender age. The principle of justice has already left this assembly. Persons who are aware of the civilized principles of justice will not remain to watch this unfair match. Those taking part in watching this wrestling match are not very much enlightened, therefore whether they speak or remain silent, they are being subjected to the reactions of sinful activities. "But my dear friends," another lady in the assembly spoke out, "just look at the face of Krishna. There are drops of perspiration on his face from chasing his enemy, and his face appears like a lotus flower with drops of water." Another lady said, "Don't you see how the face of Lord Balarama has turned especially beautiful? There is a reddish hue on his white face because he is engaged in a strenuous wrestling match with Mustaka." Another lady in the assembly addressed her friend, "Dear friend, just imagine how fortunate is the land of Vrindavana, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself is present, always decorated with flower garlands and engaged in tending cows along with his brother, Lord Balarama. He is always accompanied by his cowherd boyfriends, and he plays his transcendental flute. The residents of Vrindavana are fortunate to be able to constantly see the lotus feet of Krishna and Balarama, which are worshipped by great demigods like Lord Shiva and by the goddess of fortune. We cannot estimate how many pious activities were executed by the damsels of Rajabhumi so that they were able to enjoy the Supreme Personality of Godhead by looking upon the unparalleled beauty of his transcendental body. The beauty of the Lord is beyond compare. No one is higher than or equal to him in beauty of complexion or bodily luster. Krishna and Balarama are the reservoir of all kinds of opulence, namely wealth, strength, beauty, fame, knowledge and renunciation. The Gopas are so fortunate that they can see and think of Krishna 24 hours a day, beginning from their milking the cows or husking the paddy or churning the butter in the morning. While engaged in cleaning their houses and washing their floors, they are always absorbed in thought of Krishna. The Gopas give a perfect example of how one can execute Krishna consciousness even while performing various types of material engagements. By constantly being absorbed in the thought of Krishna, one cannot be affected by the contamination of material activities. The Gopas, therefore, are perfectly in trance, samadhi, the highest perfectional stage of mystic power. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that one who is constantly thinking of Krishna is a first-class yogi among all kinds of yogis. "My dear friends," one lady told another, "we must accept the activities of the Gopas to be the highest form of piety, otherwise, how could they have achieved the opportunity of seeing Krishna both morning and evening, in the morning when he goes to the pasturing ground with his cows and cowherd boyfriends, and in the evening when he returns with them, playing on his flute and smiling very brilliantly?" When Lord Krishna, the supersoul of every living being, understood that the ladies in the assembly were anxious for him, he decided not to continue wrestling but to kill the wrestlers immediately. The parents of Krishna and Balarama, namely Nanda Maharaja, Yasoda, Vasudeva, and Devaki, were also very anxious because they did not know the unlimited strength of their children. Lord Balarama was fighting with the wrestler Mustaka in the same way that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was fighting and wrestling with Kṛṣṇa. Lord Krishna appeared to be cruel to Kṛṣṇa, and he immediately struck him thrice with his fist. The great wrestler was jolted, to the astonishment of the audience. Kṛṣṇa then took his last chance and attacked Krishna, just as one hawk swoops upon another. Folding his two hands, He began to strike the chest of Krishna, but Lord Krishna was not even slightly disturbed, any more than an elephant is when hit by a flower garland. Krishna quickly caught the two hands of Kṛṣṇa and began to wheel him around, and simply by this centrifugal action, Kṛṣṇa lost his life. Krishna then threw him to the ground. Kṛṣṇa fell just like the flag of Indra, and all his nicely fashioned ornaments were scattered hither and thither. Mustaka also struck Balarama, and Balarama returned the stroke with great force. Mustaka began to tremble and vomit blood. Distressed, he gave up his vital force and fell down just as a tree falls down in a hurricane. After the two wrestlers were killed, a wrestler named Kuda came forward. Lord Balarama immediately caught him in his left hand and killed him nonchalantly. A wrestler of the name Sala came forward, and Krishna immediately cracked his head with a kick. A wrestler named Kosala came forward and was killed in the same way. Thus all the great wrestlers were killed by Krishna and Balarama, and the remaining wrestlers fled from the assembly out of fear for their lives. All the cowherd boyfriends of Krishna and Balarama approached them and congratulated them with great pleasure. While trumpets resounded and drums were beaten, the leg bells on the feet of Krishna and Balarama tinkled. All the people gathered there began to clap in great ecstasy, and no one could estimate the bounds of their pleasure. The Brahmanas present began to praise Krishna and Balarama ecstatically. Only Kaṁsa was morose, he neither clapped nor offered benediction to Krishna. Kaṁsa resented that the trumpets and drums should be played for Krishna's victory, and he was very sorry that the wrestlers had been killed and had fled the assembly. He therefore immediately ordered the band to stop playing and addressed his men as follows: I order that these two sons of Vasudeva be immediately driven out of Mathura. The cowherd boys who have come with them should be plundered and all their riches taken away. Nanda Maharaja should immediately be arrested and killed for his cunning behavior, and that rascal Vasudeva should also be killed without delay. Also my father, Ugrasena, who has always supported my enemies against my will, should be killed. When Kaṁsa spoke in this way, Lord Krishna became very angry with him, and within a second he jumped onto the high dais of King Kaṁsa. Kaṁsa was prepared for Krishna's attack, for he knew from the beginning that Krishna was to be the supreme cause of his death. Kaṁsa immediately unsheathed his sword and prepared to answer the challenge of Krishna with sword and shield. As Kaṁsa wielded his sword up and down, hither and thither, Lord Krishna, the supreme powerful Lord, caught hold of him with great force. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of the complete creation and from whose lotus navel the whole creation is manifested, immediately knocked the crown from the head of Kaṁsa and grabbed his long hair in his hand. He then dragged Kaṁsa from his seat to the wrestling dais and threw him down. Then Krishna at once straddled his chest and began to strike him over and over again. Simply from the strokes of Krishna's fist, Kaṁsa lost his vital force. To assure his parents that Kaṁsa was dead, Lord Krishna dragged him just as a lion drags an elephant after killing it. When people saw this, there was a great roaring sound from all sides as some spectators expressed their jubilation and others cried in lamentation. From the day Kaṁsa had heard he would be killed by the eighth son of Devaki, he was always thinking of Krishna with his wheel in hand, and because he was very much afraid of his death, he was thinking of Krishna in that form 24 hours a day, without stopping, even while eating, while walking and while breathing, and naturally he got the blessing of liberation. In the Bhagavad Gita it is stated, Sadatad bhava bhavita, a person gets his next life according to the thoughts in which he is always absorbed. Kaṁsa was thinking of Krishna with his wheel, which means Narayana, who holds a wheel, conch shell, lotus flower and club. According to the opinion of authorities, Kaṁsa attained Sarupa Mukti after death, that is to say, he attained the same form as Narayana, Vishnu. On the Vaikunఠa planets all the inhabitants have the same bodily features as Narayana. After his death, Kaṁsa attained liberation and was promoted to Vaikuntha Loka. From this instance we can understand that even a person who thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as an enemy gets liberation or a place in a Vaikunఠa planet, so what to speak of the pure devotees, who are always absorbed in favorable thoughts of Krishna. Even an enemy killed by Krishna gets liberation and is placed in the impersonal Brahma Jyotir. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is all good, anyone thinking of him, either as an enemy or as a friend, gets liberation. But the liberation of the devotee and the liberation of the enemy are not the same. The enemy generally gets the liberation of Suja, and sometimes he gets Sarupa liberation. Kaṁsa had 8 brothers, headed by Kanka, all of them younger than he, and when they learned that their elder brother had been killed, they combined together and rushed toward Krishna in great anger to kill him. Kaṁsa and his brothers were all Krishna's maternal uncles, brothers of Krishna's mother, Devaki. When Krishna killed Kaṁsa he killed his maternal uncle, which is against the regulations of Vedic injunctions. Although Krishna is independent of all Vedic injunctions, he violates the Vedic injunctions only in inevitable cases. Kaṁsa could not be killed by anyone but Krishna, therefore Krishna was obliged to kill him. But as far as Kamsa's 8 brothers were concerned, Balarama took charge of killing them. Balarama's mother, Rohini, although the wife of Vāsadeva, was not the sister of Kaṁsa, therefore Balarama took charge of killing all of Kamsa's 8 brothers. He immediately took up an available weapon, most probably the elephant's tusk which he carried, and killed the 8 brothers one after another, just as a lion kills a flock of deer. Krishna and Balarama thus verified the statement that the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears in order to give protection to the pious and to kill the impious demons, who are always enemies of the demigods. The demigods from the higher planetary system showered flowers, congratulating Krishna and Balarama. Among the demigods were powerful personalities like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, and all joined together in showing their jubilation over Kamsa's death. There were beating of drums and showering of flowers from the heavenly planets, and the wives of the demigods danced in ecstasy. The wives of Kaṁsa and his 8 brothers were aggrieved at the sudden death of their husbands, and all of them struck their foreheads and shed torrents of tears. Crying loudly and embracing the bodies of their husbands, which lay on the wrestling dais, the wives of Kaṁsa and his brothers lamented, addressing the dead bodies, "Our dear husbands, you are so kind and are the protectors of your dependents. Now, after your death, we are also dead, along with your homes and children. We no longer look auspicious. On account of your death, the auspicious functions to take place, such as the sacrifice of the bow, have all been spoiled. Our dear husbands, you treated persons ill who were faultless, and as a result you have been killed. This is inevitable because a person who torments an innocent person must be punished by the laws of nature. We know that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Master and Supreme Enjoyer of everything, therefore, one who neglects his authority can never be happy, and ultimately, as you have, he meets death. Since Krishna was kind and affectionate to his aunts, he solaced them as far as possible. The ritualistic ceremonies performed after death were then conducted under the personal supervision of Krishna because he happened to be the nephew of all the dead princes. After finishing this business, Krishna and Balarama immediately released their father and mother, Vāsadeva and Devaki, who had been imprisoned by Kaṁsa. Krishna and Balarama fell at their parents' feet and offered them prayers. Vāsadeva and Devaki had suffered so much trouble from Kaṁsa because Krishna was their son. Devaki and Vāsadeva were fully conscious of Krishna's exalted position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, therefore, although Krishna touched their feet and offered them obeisances and prayers, they did not embrace him but simply stood up to hear the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although Krishna was born as their son, Vāsadeva and Devaki were always conscious of his position. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 44th chapter of Krishna, the killing of Kaṁsa.